my husband is a white man, but he's also an ally to our community.
What's so crazy is when I got the research for this, I was reminded of this beautiful story that we saw be made into a movie with Ruth Negga last year, and it was called Loving.
Yes.
At some point, not very long ago.
In our parents' lifetime.
In our parents' lifetime, I'm getting chills thinking about this.
Yep.
A Black woman and a white man could not marry, and vice versa.
Illegal. It was illegal. Yes.
Being married to a white man.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? Because I'm not even.
Yes.
I will date one.
Yeah.
I'm not married to one. And I feel the anger and feel the judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, so I will start by saying I never saw myself being with someone dating outside my race. I always thought that, my father is Black, my stepfather is Black, that I would end up with a Black man.
Because that's a big deal in the Black community.
Say again?
That's a big deal in the Black community.
It is. And, not so much in my home, but my family is from a small town called Demopolis in Alabama. And Southern people, you are a Southern gentleman yourself. They are a little slower to get on the train of progression, okay? And I was nervous about bringing my white boyfriend down to the country, honey, and having him, make it through and be received and accepted by my uncles and my cousins. But my family they are who they are, but they are accepting and they're loving. And if he's a good person, if they're good people, my family accepts them. And my husband is an amazing person. He has a beautiful spirit. And they accepted him. And plus, he brought beer, and they love beer. So that was the end of that.
It was done.
It was done. But, it's my husband and I never really, truly experienced any hardcore discrimination because of who we are and being seen as a Black woman, white man couple. But when we read the history, and when we would talk about the history of the Loving Supreme Court ruling and all that entailed, and again, the fact that it was very much so illegal for a Black woman and a white man, or for couples that were not of the same race to marry just 50-something years ago, it does enrage you and make you want to, throw something and be mad at this society and the systems that are put in place that exist in every facet, in every part of the makeup of this country. You cannot take two steps in this country without finding some roadblock for people of color, down to who you love.
100%.
And that is wild to me. But it's funny because I actually have had, since I've been on my show, I've had a lot of Black women write me and ask me, what is it like to be with a white man? I'm considering dating outside my race. What is it like? How did your family accept them, et cetera, et cetera?
Isn't it crazy that in 2020 that it's almost like you were going to a third world country and going to live there on the moon. Like, how is it? Moon.
It's so strange. And even my aunts would ask, so what is it like? As if I'm dating, a frog or a rock. Like, no, he's a human. He has flesh and bones and blood, cries. He's a human man. He just happens to be white. And for us, and I get this a lot from people who don't understand what it's like to be with a white man as a Black woman who is very, I'm Black, okay? I'm Black still. And I don't apologize for that. And people ask, how is it being in your household? Like, you have, I don't hold back when I speak on the things that I feel that white people can do better or do differently. I don't hold back on my critiques of our white cousins and our white people. And people will ask me, does that make your husband uncomfortable? No.
Yeah.
And if it did, he wouldn't be my husband.
100%.
Because the things that I speak on are essentially the things that we are all now openly talking about, because it has now become the trend, and prayerfully it becomes less of a trend and more of a habit and more of a comfortable conversation. But I'm talking about things that need to be discussed. And my husband is a white man, but he's also an ally to our community. And that is, I think, the most important thing about interacting with people who are not like you and I, white people, non-white people who, don't look like us, essentially. It's important that we have people in our corner who are going to speak up for us.
100%.
And being that oppression has happened and has taken place at the hands of the white race, it is the responsibility of the white race to dismantle it.
100%.
So what I love about this time that we're living in now, and I'm calling it a sort of cultural eruption of consciousness, if you will. What I love about this cultural eruption of consciousness is that we do now have this new bandwagon of white people who are suddenly awake and who suddenly want to, be a part of the conversation and be a part of solutions and be a part of dismantling systemic racism and oppression and breaking down these walls. And I'm giving the baton to you.
100%.
Me and my people, we've been doing this. We've been here. Okay. There are anthologies and films. There are books. The work is there. So I don't have to do much else. It's time for our white cousins, our white family and friends, our white people, our white allies to do their part to continue to dismantle these crazy walls and these crazy systemic oppressive ways.
Because let's be real, if 50 years ago enough white people said, "Oh my God, why are making this illegal for white people to marry black people? This is crazy." Everybody would have been like, "Okay, well."
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's not.
Being from the South, what's so crazy to me is that I can walk around hand in hand with a man.
Yes.
Kind of fine, kind of, not really. But
yeah, ish. We're getting there.
If I showed up with a white man, it would be even worse. And it's almost crazy that we still have to have those conversations, still get those looks,
Yeah. And we don't have so much of that, the looks where we live, because in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, this is a very diverse area. So there are people mixed up with all kinds of things, honey. So a lot of that.
I do well in DC.
Okay, come on then. Yes, come through. Yes, no.
I'm on fire in DC.
Mm-hmm. Come through. One of my favorite LGBTQ bar/restaurants, Brixton, is closing. So I'm so sad. Pour some out for Brixton. But you would do. I know you do well. You do well.
We do well.
Yes. In the
what I love that you're doing right now is you're using your platform to really educate people and keep the momentum going, even smaller scale when it comes to elections. Why are city and statewide elections and regional elections just as important as November 3rd?
Yes, well, Tuesday, November 3rd is very important. But even before we get there, our primary elections are so important because you're not just voting on, who you want to see be nominated to the DNC or the RNC or what have you. You are voting on so many of the smaller local officials who directly affect you on this call, you're on the line, in your communities, the roads that you drive on, the food that you eat, the kind of education and the curriculum that happens in your school systems.
Yeah.
The attorney general, okay, in your state is voted on in primary elections, okay? So all this, we're tasked now with having to call these AGs in Aurora, Colorado for Elijah McClain, who I just called and cussed and fussed and sent my emails up to the people, up the powers that be. We are tasked with calling AGs in Georgia, AGs in Ferguson, AGs in Missouri. These people, you vote them in. So when they are given when they are tasked with having to decide whether or not a police officer should be prosecuted, should lose their job, should go to jail, should be thrown under a jail for putting their foot or their knee on the neck of a black man, for allegedly bringing a counterfeit bill into a store, you have the power to decide who those people are. And when they don't do their jobs, and when they overlook their jobs, and when they show you who they are and how they really feel about people that look like us, vote them out.
100.
Vote them out and vote somebody in who's going to speak for people that look like us, people that are marginalized. And that's not just Black people. That's LGBT people. That's handicapped people. There are so many groups in this country that don't get the fair shake because there aren't people in place to speak for them. And when you go to the polls at primary elections, that's who you're voting for. Judges, everybody.
And don't just rely on a DRR next to somebody's name. Do your
research. Yes.
Because research.
It matters.
If you can spend an hour and 25 minutes on Instagram trying to find some tights, you can do.
Listen, take that hour, put the tights down, and use those thumbs, exercise those thumbs, honey, to figure out what judge is going to be sitting in office or sitting at the bench for umpteen thousand years, working for you or not working for you. In 2012, I worked in Southampton Roads. I built neighborhood teams. I registered voters. I worked in some of the poorer areas of Norfolk and Virginia Beach, Virginia. And we worked hard, and we reelected our president, my president, with I think it was 93 and 98% of the vote in my regions, respectively. So Norfolk and Virginia Beach. So we did our work, and I also worked on Norfolk State's campus and Old Dominion's campus. So shout out to my campus teams. And the amount of time that I spent shout out to Cedar Grove, which is a bus stop in Norfolk. And again, we're talking about poor people. We're talking about former felons, returning citizens. We're talking about, people that you don't see on Bravo TV. Okay?
And by the way, because those three groups of people that you just named are suppressed at the polls, or really their vote is taken away. And no matter who you are, what kind of money you make, or what your background is, a vote is a vote, and it should be yours. That's your right as an American.
Yes. And there are so many misconceptions. I met so many former felons who thought that because they were felons, they were banned from voting for the rest of their lives. And that's simply not true. It's different state to state. Some states will reinstate your rights several years after you serve your time. Some states require you to have to submit paperwork, which I think is ridiculous, before you can have your voting rights reinstated. But I did a lot of work shuffling paperwork to help some of these former felons who had served their time, pay their debt to society, for them to be able to reestablish their rights to vote. And I met so many people who would say to me, well, I don't do that. I don't do that. My vote doesn't count. And you just fall on your jaw hits the floor to hear that. And it's heartbreaking, especially in this very, very important election. This election is probably one of the most important in our lifetime. Yeah. If we allow this president another 4 years, he essentially will be, writing our history. I was going to say our death certificates. I don't want to be that morbid, but he is writing he is etching himself in history. He will be essentially able to appoint one or two more people to our Supreme Court. He will continue to be able to, for a lifetime. Remember, RBG is holding on, honey, but she ain't holding on forever, okay?
If y'all don't know who RBG is, when I tell you this woman is holding on, God has put his hand in hers, and she is holding on. And she...
Bless her, Yeah. There are so many ramifications and so many things that will be irreparable, and just it pains me to think about it. And I'm not here to tell anybody who to vote for. I registered people from all walks of life and across party lines. I registered Democrats, I registered Republicans, I registered independents, I registered Green Party members, everybody, okay? People that wanted to vote for Big Bird.
Come right.
Yes, come through. Exercise your right. That's the most important thing. But I want to underscore how important it is, not just on the national level, but on the state and the local level, that you be registered, that you know where you're registered to vote, that your registration is up to date. Many times you go to the polls and you realize, oh, this is the wrong polling place. And if you get there late, you may not have time to jet across town to get to your actual polling location. And then you're up the creek. You're, without a paddle. Yeah. And that's a form of voter suppression. There are so many of these little miniature ways that people will find to suppress our votes. And a lot of that, yes, a lot of it comes down to education. You have to educate yourself to prevent having your vote suppressed. And that's on you. And that's on you holding your community accountable, your family, your friends, your circle accountable.
And I'm letting everybody know, if you can wait 2 hours on Ticketmaster to get tickets.
Okay, you can wait for some Yeezy, for them prison slides, some Yeezy prison slides, okay?
We're not even going to talk about the price of the prison slides.
Okay.
If you going to wait in line to do that, you going to research what the best weather is to make sure when you wear your sundress out that you can do it right, or if you can wear your good hair because of the rain, you can look up where you're supposed to be on November 3rd when those primary elections happen. I'm telling you right now, one of the greatest and most terrible things I've ever seen at the same time was what was happening in Kentucky last week.
Oh my God. 600,000 people, one polling location. Who? Where? How? And literally, you want to leave. Exit stage left. Because this has to be fiction. That has to be fiction. Like, turn the TV off. I can't, and you can't tell me that is not suppressing votes, because that was in Louisville, Kentucky, where the majority of people were people of color, marginalized people, people that look like me and you and us, okay? Yeah. They didn't do that. They didn't do that in Nashville, okay? They didn't do that where the white people are. They did that where we are. That is systemic. That is purposeful. That is purposeful.
You gotta, this is the problem. And this is why we're having these conversations, because there are things that you don't know because they don't affect you now.
Yes.
As a person not of color, like, you don't realize these little things are happening because you're not in that situation yet. Yeah. But the reason why we want to have these things stop is because I don't want my friends who are white to have to do this again 20 years later because their kids are married to black people. Yeah. Or they have kids with black people. Who wants to do this again in 20 years? I don't want a baby Bjorn on my side doing this with my children.
Yeah.
And if they can suppress my vote, or they can suppress a gay vote, they can suppress a vote for women, years down the line. They can suppress votes for anybody.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of this so your kids don't have to go through this.
Yeah. And the more that people are aware of voter suppression, the less able they are to do it. People are able to get away with these things because they're doing it in the dark. The lights are off, so they can crawl around and creep around and whisper and do these things because there's no light being shined on it. And again, this is where I employ our allies. If more non-persons of color were speaking out about voter suppression and the ways that it is affecting communities of color, it would be harder to do these things. It would be harder to close down 180 polling locations and leave one for 600,000 people to vote. And then so many times, even in one polling location, there may be, where there should be 20 polling stations, 5 work. So you've got all these people in line waiting to vote on 5 working, able-bodied machines.
I'm not going to be shady, but a voting booth, a voting poll place is like Walmart. There's 20 lines, but only 5.
Right. Yes. And the line wraps around the freezer section. Yeah, I'm not doing that.
How many times have you been to a grocery store and you're like, how the hell is there 6 people in the produce department stacking, fruit, but there's 5 lines open out of 20?
Yes. I'm literally waiting in line in the aisles, okay? I don't want to do that, and we should not have to do that. In 2020, technology is too advanced that we are dealing with broken polling booths and one polling location for 600,000 people. There's no way. There is no way. And we have to speak on this and shine a light on it.
I love you, and thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this. Thank you to Bravo and to NBC Universal for allowing us to have this platform. You have no idea what a difference I know it's going to make, and just allowing us to have our voices be amplified on a platform that is so influential is incredible, and it's going to help to move the culture forward. I'm sure of it, and I'm here for all of it.